BBC One is where the stars come out on VE night. At 5 to 7, Corporal Jones has a confession to make.
I have fallen in love, Captain Manlin, with a woman.
At 7:30, Albert Square celebrates VE Day as Arthur gets nostalgic. At 8, the nation celebrates live when Her Majesty the Queen lights a beacon of peace and Dame Vera Lynn leads a cast of thousands in songs and remembrance. Then at 9:05, we call up the stars of today who recreate the stars of 1945 in a special concert. BBC One on the march. VE Day, Holiday Monday.
On BBC One now, News 45 of VE Day itself, presented as of today by Sue Lawley.
Good evening. The headlines tonight, the 8th of May 1945. Britain is celebrating victory in Europe. Huge crowds are outside Buckingham Palace from where the King has tonight broadcast to the Empire.
Today, we give thanks to God for a great deliverance. Speaking from our empire's oldest capital city, war-battered, but never for one moment daunted or dismayed. Speaking from London, I ask you to join with me in that act of thanksgiving.
There are also huge crowds in Whitehall, where a few moments ago the Prime Minister, Mr. Churchill, told them it was a victory for the cause of freedom.
This is your victory. God bless you all.
The scenes are being repeated across the kingdom as the nation celebrates the end of nearly 6 years of war in Europe. In our long history, Mr. Churchill said, tonight we have never seen a greater day than this. Here in London and in every city, town and village across the land, it's been a day of thanksgiving and celebration. The war in Europe, which for Britain has lasted 5 years and 8 months, is finally over. The long-awaited news was confirmed at 3 o'clock this afternoon in a broadcast from Downing Street. The Prime Minister gave details of the German surrender. Hostilities will end officially at 1 minute after midnight tonight. And later, to cheers from MPs, Mr. Churchill told the House of Commons that our dear Channel Islands, the only part of His Majesty's dominions to be occupied by the German foe, are to be freed today. The celebrations are reaching their climax tonight. At the centre of the day's events has been the Prime Minister, Winston Churchill, and the crowds have loved him.
This is the day we thought would never come. After nearly 6 years of grueling war in Europe, it's all over. And in a spontaneous eruption of national relief, the people of London took to the streets today. The dark shadow of the swastika and everything it stood for has been removed from our lives. At 3 o'clock this afternoon, the official announcement came from the man who is perhaps more associated with the great victory than anyone else.
This is London. The Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Winston Churchill.
Yesterday morning at 2:41 a.m. at General Eisenhower's headquarters, General Jodl, the representative of the German High Command, and of Grand Admiral Dönitz, the designated head of the German state, signed the Act of Unconditional Surrender. Today is Victory in Europe Day.
After his historic broadcast, Mr. Churchill was driven in an open car from number 10 towards Parliament, a journey he's made hundreds of times, but never like this. The crowds just didn't want to let him go, and he arrived a quarter of an hour late. After addressing the House of Commons, where he was loudly cheered by MPs on all sides, Mr. Churchill joined a procession led by the Speaker to St. Margaret's Church in Westminster for a service of thanksgiving, again surrounded by people who'd been waiting all day to catch a glimpse of their war leader. Earlier in the day, the Prime Minister had been driven to Buckingham Palace to lunch with the King, and he became possibly the first man in history to walk in smoking a cigar. He returned to the palace later in the afternoon. There, together with other members of the coalition government and the chiefs of staff, the Prime Minister posed for pictures with His Majesty. Then came the rare privilege of appearing on the balcony of the palace with the King and Queen and the two princesses, Elizabeth still in uniform. Then Mr. Churchill again had to fight his way back through the throngs of people to the offices of the Ministry of Health in Whitehall. Another balcony, another crowd.
This is your victory. God bless you all.
There's no doubt that this will be very much remembered as Churchill's Day.
But the Prime Minister told the crowds it was their day, and all over the country people have been celebrating. Flags have been brought out of attics, church bells have pealed, and the centres of our towns have been lit up with floodlights and with fireworks.
Exuberant crowds have been flooding the West End of London all day. 100,000 in Trafalgar Square alone, according to police estimates. Strangers embraced, kissing and cheering, overjoyed that after 5 years and 8 months, the agony of war in Europe has at last come to an end. The entire country was celebrating victory. In Edinburgh, thousands gathered to hear Mr. Churchill's triumphant VE message relayed by the BBC.
Signed the act of unconditional surrender of all German lands.
There was dancing in the city's squares and in the back streets too. As throughout the country, in Glasgow, the returning men were the heroes of the day, and they hung out the flags for our American and Russian allies too. Victory buses have been touring the streets in the north of England, and everywhere bonfires are being built and effigies of Hitler prepared for burning tonight. A typical street party in Gateshead, one of thousands being held in England. Rationing has proved a challenge to the women providing the party fare, but there's nothing lacking in the atmosphere. Rolling out the barrel may not be so easy. Fearing a repetition of the drunken scenes at the end of the last Great War, brewers have refused to supply extra beer. However, the police have reported very few unpleasant incidents today. A nation intoxicated not by alcohol, but by news of victory. Tonight, with a thrill of anticipation, everyone is looking forward to midnight, when the war against Germany will officially come to an end.
In his broadcast tonight from Buckingham Palace, the King paid a solemn tribute to those who are not here to celebrate victory in Europe. In the Far East, we have yet to deal with the Japanese, a determined and cruel foe, he called them. And then he spoke about those who have given their lives in defence of freedom.
Then let us remember those who will not come back. Their constancy and courage in battle, their sacrifice and endurance in the face of a merciless enemy. We shall have failed, and the blood of our dearest will have flowed in vain, if the victory which they died to win does not lead to a lasting peace founded on justice and goodwill.
It was 9 o'clock in the morning in Washington when President Truman broadcast to the American people. With the war against Japan in mind, he said, "Our victory is but half won." In fact, Americans have been celebrating for the last 24 hours after a European reporter broke the news embargo.
For most New Yorkers, VE Day actually came yesterday. Hundreds of thousands of people clogged Times Square, and at least 1,000 tons of paper was thrown out of windows in celebration. News spread of the impending German surrender through radio broadcasts and newspapers yesterday after one reporter in Europe broke a Supreme Headquarters embargo and jumped the gun on today's official announcement. In San Francisco, news of the German capitulation arrived as the Soviet Foreign Minister, Mr. Molotov, was speaking to the United Nations. Although there was palpable rejoicing among the diplomats gathered there, for the people of this Pacific city, there's still an overriding sense that their war is not yet over. Among soldiers and sailors in particular, there's a feeling that their lives may still be in jeopardy as the war with Japan moves towards its bloody conclusion. Today, President Harry Truman officially announced VE Day in an address to his people timed to coincide with those in Europe.
General Eisenhower informs me that the forces of Germany have surrendered to the United Nations. The flags of freedom fly all over Europe.
Today in Paris, meanwhile, the boulevards were choked with people, a day-long party fueled by the government's decision to give everyone an extra bottle of wine on the ration. General de Gaulle laid a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier and described the war as a victory for the Allies and for the newly formed United Nations.
In Germany, the acting Führer Admiral Dönitz broadcast early this morning from the only radio station that remains in German hands. He said he had ordered the unconditional surrender of all fighting forces in all theatres of war. He went on, "We must face facts squarely. The foundations on which the German Reich was built have collapsed." Germany is completely defeated, its cities destroyed, its people stunned. The BBC's Winfried Vaughan-Thomas was in the town square of Lüneburg, near Field Marshal Montgomery's headquarters, when the surrender was announced there this afternoon.
Hello, BBC. This is Winfried Vaughan-Thomas reporting to you from Germany. This is VE Day in Germany. And here in the old town of Lüneburg, we're standing in the main square where the Germans have assembled. They've been told to assemble by loudspeaker to listen to an important announcement. And now they stand before the old town hall in a docile crowd.
People of Lüneburg, the Nazi government and the German Wehrmacht has surrendered unconditionally to the Allied Expeditionary Forces. Europe has been brought to misery and famine by Germany. The German nation must not expect to fare better than the nations they have overrun.
The announcement has been made. The surrender terms have been given to the citizens of Lüneburg. They pause for a moment, and then, without comment, the crowd starts to disperse. We, who are in the crowd in British uniforms, can imagine a different VE Day in Britain. We can picture your excitement and the cheering and the flags. Here, in the town square of Lüneburg, is the other side of the picture.
That report from Winfried Vaughan-Thomas. Finally tonight, now it can be told, the weather forecast, which has been censored for the past 5.5 years, classed as information which could be helpful to the enemy. London was the warmest place in the British Isles today, despite the rain. The temperatures tomorrow will again be in the 70s, but thundery showers will be widespread with some coastal fog in the northeast. The outlook for the next few days, unsettled. Finally, the headlines again. In Europe, the war is over. Germany has surrendered. On the other side of the world, British servicemen are still fighting the unconquered enemy, Japan. But across Britain tonight, people are celebrating Victory in Europe Day. From the BBC in London, good night.
News 45 will return on the 15th of August with a special 30-minute edition for VJ Day. In a little over an hour on BBC One, you can see live coverage of the grand finale to the VE Day celebrations in Hyde Park in London for a night of music, performance, pageant and history, including the lighting of the first of 1,000 beacons across Europe by Her Majesty the Queen as the nation celebrates.
You're a waste of space.
One of the BBC's best-loved comedy series returns,
Fawlty Towers, how are you? Nice day.
where you're guaranteed a warm, accommodating reception.
You want to run the place? No, I just want to shut up then.
And the service always comes with a smile.
Good morning, good morning.
The door is always open at Fawlty Towers. Sunday at 7:30 on BBC One.
The door was here.
The flags are flying in Albert Square for a special EastEnders in 35 minutes.